Have you ever felt like you're waiting for something, but you don't know exactly what? As if there were a force inside you asking for change, screaming for rebirth, but you insist on waiting for the right moment. The truth is that this ideal moment never comes, because the right time to evolve is not a point in the future, it's a decision that arises in the now. Waiting for perfect signs, for less fear or more clarity, is the most sophisticated and camouflaged form of self-sabotage. And the longer you wait, the more your old self grows stronger. That version of you that has already expired, but continues to dominate your choices, your inner voice, your unconscious repetitions. Napoleon Hill called this a lack of definite purpose. Without clarity about who you are becoming, you will be constantly pulled back to who you used to be. The lack of decision is, in itself, a decision, and usually the most dangerous one. Because when you don't position yourself as the creator of your new identity, the world, old pains, and past patterns take over that role for you. Evolution in this sense is not about doing better, it is about doing differently, from a place that does not yet exist, but that needs to start being inhabited now. Tony Robbins talks about identity as the soil where everything flourishes or dies. You cannot sustain a new reality without killing the previous character, that part of you that has learned to survive, that has memorized the script of pain, that knows how to move even when wounded. It does not give up space easily. It will fight. It will disguise its permanence with good intentions. It will dress up in the clothes of productivity, of attempts, of false change. But what is not broken with decision and emotion becomes repetition, and the cycle continues. There is a dangerous, almost comforting belief that evolution is always gentle, that we can grow without confrontation, transform without hurting, change without leaving behind. But this is just another whisper of the old self trying to survive. True transformation is a rupture. It is not an adjustment. It is renunciation. It is when you stop negotiating with the old version and start moving as if you no longer accept living with it. It's not about improving yourself, but about replacing yourself, about energetically expelling the toxic tenant that still occupies the house of your soul. And the more you try to evolve in peace with who you were, the more violent the internal war becomes, because there is no possible agreement between the self that wants to be born and the self that needs to die. Either you choose one, or you will live in the eternal middle ground, this vibrational limbo where nothing flourishes, nothing sustains itself, nothing really changes. And living in this place is like dying alive. That's why this video is not an invitation for you to gradually improve. It's a call for you to break away now, symbolically kill the version that has already expired, and be reborn, not as a possibility, but as an irrevocable choice. If this message found you at a time when everything seems to be on hold, where you feel like you no longer fit into your old skin, write in the comments, "I decide to evolve." This small gesture can become your first commitment to the new. Now let's dive in together, because the old self does not give in to arguments. It only gives in to your new frequency. And this frequency begins with truth, the silent pain of being who you are no longer. There is a suffering that does not scream. It whispers deep within your soul while you try to maintain the appearance of normality. It is the discomfort of living within an identity that no longer makes sense, but that you still insist on carrying, like clothes that no longer fit, but that you refuse to take off. Like a room that was once your home, but now suffocates you. There is a type of anxiety that arises not from what is missing, but from what is left in you. Emotional leftovers of a self that no longer represents you, but continues to be present, acting, deciding, sabotaging. The mind even tries to move on. You even get inspired by new habits, new ideas, new dreams, but something in you still comes back. It goes back to the same reactions. It goes back to the same emotional vices. You return to the same internal narrative that says, "It's not for me, maybe not now, maybe later." This coming back to yourself, not in the spiritual sense, but in the sense of returning to the version of yourself that you no longer want to be, is what hurts the most. Because you see glimpses of what could be, You touch for a moment the power that exists beyond the pain. But soon after, you withdraw. You go back. You lose faith. This movement of expansion and contraction is what tires you, what makes you sick, what saps your spiritual energy. And what no one has told you is that this isn't just a lack of focus or discipline. It's vibrational resistance. It's the body and the psyche trying to keep a vanquished identity alive, even though they know it's already dead inside. And that hurts. It hurts to wake up and put on a soul that's no longer yours. It hurts to smile with a face that no longer reflects your truth. It hurts to pretend that everything is okay when, inside, you feel like you're disappearing. But there's something sacred about this pain, because it's the first call from your soul saying, I don't belong here anymore. And hearing that call is the beginning of everything. Not to change completely, yet, but to stop pretending. Stop fooling yourself. Stop using waiting as an excuse to stay where you already know you shouldn't be anymore. This silent pain, if you have the courage to feel it completely, without distractions, can become the gateway to your greatest transformation. And that is why now, we begin to confront what sustains this pain, what feeds it, what you still need to let die. Invisible mistake, trying to evolve without breaking with the old emotional system. There is a subtle trap hidden in the sincere desire to change, the attempt to transform your life while keeping the emotional field that sustains it intact. You change habits, you alter your routine, you put goals on paper, but something essential remains the same. The inner place from which all these actions start. And if this place does not change, nothing really changes. It is like changing the furniture in a house whose foundations are rotten. The emotional structure is the invisible foundation of all transformation. It holds your unacknowledged fears, your repetitive patterns, your associations of pain and pleasure. As long as this old system is active, it will silently sabotage any attempt at rebirth. You may change on the outside, but on the inside, something will always pull you back. This return happens almost imperceptibly. A recurring thought, a familiar emotion that reappears in moments of decision, a sudden tiredness in the face of a new opportunity. The old self does not act violently. It acts familiarly. It presents itself as security, as comfort, as your way. But what appears to be you is actually what's left of who you learned to be in order to survive. Transforming yourself is not about changing attitudes. It's about dissolving the emotional field that sustains those attitudes. It's about recognizing that behind your procrastination, there is perhaps an unconscious loyalty to pain. That behind your fear of failure, there is a silent pact with the old self that learned not to try. That behind your confusion, there is a deep resistance to breaking with the known. This rupture is not rational. It is vibrational. It requires confronting unfelt emotions, unintegrated traumas, the parts of you that still cling to suffering as a form of identity. And only when you enter this field, only when you dive into this inner terrain, does true change begin. Not as an effort, but as an inevitable consequence of the new vibrational field that you have begun to inhabit. From this point on, we no longer talk about effort. We talk about coherence. And coherence only arises when the new behavior no longer needs to fight against the old system, because that system has finally been dissolved. And that is what we are going to reveal now. How this false self still inhabits you, even when you believe you are changing. The false self that you defend without realizing it. There is an identity within you that no longer serves you, but that you protect as if it were sacred. A version shaped by wounds, memories, fears, and old beliefs. It no longer reflects who you are, but it still dictates how you feel, behave, and see yourself. And the most disturbing thing is that most of the time, you do not even realize that you are defending this defeated version, because it has become so familiar, so ingrained that it seems natural. It seems like you. This defense is subtle. When someone suggests that you can do more, you feel resistance. When life opens up a new possibility, you hesitate. When things start to work out, a part of you sabotages itself. And this sabotage doesn't come from your conscience. It comes from the false self. The one that has learned that it's safer to repeat yourself than to expand. That prefers the predictability of pain to the uncertainty of transformation. That thinks it's protecting you, but is, in fact, limiting you. Imposter syndrome is often not a fear of not being capable. It's an attachment to your old identity. It's your past self telling you, this isn't for us. We're not like that. You're forcing something that doesn't suit you. And for a while, you believe it. You believe that you're still that fragile, insecure, limited person, even though you've already experienced proof to the contrary. You need to understand, your old identity fights to survive, and it does so using your own voice. It questions, it judges, it postpones. And the more you try to evolve without facing it head-on, the stronger it becomes. Not because it is more powerful, but because you still listen to it. Breaking with this false self is not a battle. It is an awakening. It is the moment when you recognize that you no longer need it, that you no longer depend on old pain to feel safe, that you no longer want to explain yourself based on traumas. And when this clarity arrives, something inside you begins to silence this imposter. It does not disappear all at once, but it loses strength, and you, little by little, begin to move from a new reference, that of truth. And it is with this truth that we now follow, because for the new to be born, it needs a space where the brain can recognize it as real. And this space only opens when you offer not only intention, but emotional proof. Why most people fail when trying to start over. The brain does not accept the new version without emotional proof. The intention is noble. The desire is real. The motivation exists. But even so, many people fail when trying to start over, not for lack of will, but because they do not understand the emotional functioning of their own brain. Changing is a decision, yes, but sustaining this change requires something deeper, a sensory reconfiguration. The brain does not believe in the new version of you just because you want it. It needs to feel it as true. It needs emotional proof. When you try to change with only mental effort, you activate thought. But thought without emotion does not create internal reality. It is like trying to move a mountain with a sigh. The force that transforms is not only in the repetition of positive phrases or in the execution of new habits. It is in the emotional experience associated with this new identity. The brain only begins to accept that you are someone new when it experiences new sensations of belonging, of deserving, of joy, of freedom, sensations that you may not have felt deeply in a long time. This lack of internal reward is what makes the brain reject the new route. It says, this is uncomfortable, this is strange, go back to what we already know, even if what it knows is pain, anxiety, or sabotage. Because the brain does not seek what is good, it seeks what is familiar. And if familiarity is linked to suffering, that is where it will pull you, always. This is why so many start out excited and then give up silently, because the new journey becomes emotionally empty. It is an attempt at reprogramming without nourishment, without joy associated with the new, without a sense of relief, without the vibration of belonging to the new reality. And without this, the old self, which already has a built-in emotional history, easily wins. The way out is not to do more. It is to feel differently. It is to cultivate emotions that validate the new identity. It is to give the brain what it needs to believe, experience, vibration, presence. When you connect emotionally with the new version, even for a moment, you open internal doors that no thought alone could open. And so, we continue, because the old self does not disappear with reasoning. It dissolves with symbolism, with rituals, with gestures that tell the unconscious. The old story is over, and it is this type of gesture that awaits us now. The energetic death of the old self needs to be symbolic and real. Not all transformations happen in the realm of words. Some only materialize when the body feels it. The environment changes, and the unconscious receives the signal that something has, in fact, ended. The old self is not just a set of outdated thoughts. It is a vibrational entity that feeds on symbols, rituals, and repetitions. Therefore, for it to die, it is not enough to understand that it needs to die. It is necessary to bury it. The unconscious does not respond to logic, it responds to meanings. And when you create a symbolic act, like burning an old diary, changing the environment where you lived in pain, ending a cycle with a letter that will never be sent, you are telling him, in energetic language, this is over. And when he understands that it is over, something inside you loosens. An invisible bond is undone. A silent presence loses strength. Repetition begins to dissolve. These gestures are not superstition. They are profound language. What is not symbolized is perpetuated. When you do not end an emotional story clearly, it continues to operate in the background, taking up space, contaminating new attempts. You may even start something new, but you carry, without realizing it, the echo of the old, the weight of the unsaid, the vibration of the unfinished. This is why some people cannot connect with the present, because they are emotionally inhabiting pasts that are still alive within them, not by conscious choice, but by lack of symbolic closure. And symbolic death is often what liberates. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't have to be exposed, but it has to be true. It has to be felt. This type of gesture is like a rite of passage. It doesn't transform by itself, but it opens the necessary gap for transformation to enter. It clears the field. It closes the door. It allows the new to finally have space to be born without being contaminated by the old. And when this space opens, a new type of clarity begins to emerge. But with it, the first vibrational conflicts also arise, because you begin to act from the new, but you still feel remnants of the old. And it is at this point that internal incoherence becomes the next challenge, the courage to sustain your new vibration, even when the body still vibrates fear. That is what we are talking about now. Vibrational dissonance, when you vibrate fear while trying to manifest courage. There is a sensitive point in the journey of transformation where you have already made the decision to change. You have already symbolically broken with the past. You have already started to act like who you want to be. But even so, you feel that something is not flowing. It is like trying to run with your feet stuck to the ground, like wanting freedom while your heart still vibrates with fear. This incoherence has a name: vibrational dissonance. It happens when you try to manifest courage without first healing the fear that sustains its foundation. When you declare to the universe that you are ready, but inside, you still vibrate like someone who doubts. The energy field does not respond to your conscious intentions. It responds to your predominant frequency. And if this frequency is fear disguised as bravery, it is fear that will continue to shape your reality. This is not weakness. It is humanity. We all carry, to some degree, this split between what we want to live and what we still feel. The question is, how willing are we to face this distance with honesty? Because healing does not come from repeating affirmations. It comes from integrating what still trembles within us. It comes from embracing fear without judging it, from listening to it, from moving past it. Only then will it stop silently controlling our steps. Vibrating courage is not the absence of fear. It is a conscious presence before it. It is recognizing that it is there, but it is no longer in control. And by doing this, you begin to align intention and energy. You begin to act as who you already are, but this time with a coherent heart, with an accepting body, with a peaceful soul. This alignment is not instantaneous. It is constructed. It requires practice, presence, and loving vigilance over your own internal states. Because dissonance can return, but now you know how to recognize it. You know that when everything seems stuck, perhaps it is not the world blocking you, but your own vibration asking for realignment. And when this consciousness stabilizes, you reach a vibrational place where everything seems to be dying, and at the same time, beginning. A deep void that is not absence. It is transition. It is the vacuum of identity, the silent space between who you were and who is being born. The vacuum of identity, the place where most people give up. There is a moment in the journey of change that few can name, and that is precisely why so many give up when they reach it. It is no longer the past, but it is not yet the future. It is an intermediate space, suspended in time, where everything seems uncertain, where you no longer recognize yourself in who you were, but you still do not feel firm in who you are becoming. This space has an unspoken name: vacuum of identity. In this place, the silence is deafening. You no longer have the same desires. You no longer react as before. You no longer fit into conversations, habits, old companions, but you also do not feel strong enough to occupy the new vibration. It is as if you were between two lives. And this in-between place can be disconcerting because it offers no clear answers. It provides no external validation. It brings no immediate rewards. It's just empty. And the void for many is intolerable. Accustomed to noise, urgency, and fulfillment, we want to get out of this silence as soon as possible. But it is precisely in this silence that the new identity begins to germinate. Not in the noise of conquests, but in the silence of reconstruction. The vacuum is the womb of the new version. It is the space where everything that was needs to die completely, so that the new is not born with residues of the old. It is at this point that the ego screams, that fear intensifies, that doubt tries to convince you to return, because the vacuum offers no certainty. It offers surrender. It is there that you are invited to trust, even without guarantees, to follow, even without a map, to sustain the new frequency, even without visible results. And this is the true test. It is not willpower. It is vibrational faith, surrender. Few remain in this vacuum long enough for it to become fertile soil. Most return, reactivate the old, retake the patterns, because it is more comfortable to be something known than to be nobody for a while. But whoever crosses this silence, whoever sustains the void with presence and intention, witnesses something sacred, the emergence of the new self, not as an idea, but as an embodied vibration. And it is in this liminal state that the most powerful moment arises, that of energetically sealing this transition, giving a symbolic end to the past and a conscious beginning to the new. And for this, more than words are needed. A ritual is needed, a practice that speaks directly to the unconscious, that clearly marks the passage from one identity to another, the ritual of the death of the old self. Not all change happens in silence. Some need to be proclaimed or sealed, felt with the whole body, because the unconscious does not understand the logic of desire. It understands the language of the symbolic, of gesture, of the sacred act. That is why crossing the identity vacuum requires more than patience. It requires a milestone, a point of no return, something that firmly says, from now on, this version no longer exists. This ritual does not need to be grand. It needs to be true. It is an encounter between you and your story, an intimate space where the old self is acknowledged, honored for what it has held up to now, and finally released. Because it's not about denying who you were. It's about allowing that version to rest. Stop carrying it like a burden. Stop defending it like a shield. Writing is one of the most powerful ways to access this field, putting everything that this identity represents on paper, the pain that created it, the beliefs that sustained it, the behaviors that defined it, writing without filter, without trying to appear strong, and then declaring the end, burning that letter, burying it, tearing it up, any gesture that represents, in a sensorial way, that cycle has ended. This simple act has a power that words cannot reach. It organizes the unconscious. It signals to the body that a new frequency is available. It cleanses the vibrational field. And more than that, it gives you back the power to choose who you want to be from now on, not as a goal, but as a felt truth. You can also transform the environment around you. Move an object, donate clothes that carry memories, swap a perfume, a soundtrack, an image, small things with deep meaning. Because when the external changes with intention, the internal follows suit. Everything aligns. Everything vibrates in unison with your new decision. And when this happens, a new type of strength emerges. Not one based on rigid discipline, but one that is born of coherence, from the alignment between what you do and who you are. And it is this coherence that transforms effort into flow, discipline into naturalness, struggle into lightness, and that is what we are now turning to. How to replace the weight of obligation with the lightness of vibrational authenticity, a mental model to replace discipline with coherence. For a long time, we believed that the key to transformation was discipline, repetition, willpower. But what most people don't realize is that disciplining behavior that is out of alignment with your truth is a type of emotional torture. It's trying to push your body down a path that your soul doesn't recognize. It's doing with effort what, if it were coherent, would flow naturally. True change doesn't require you to force yourself. It requires you to align yourself. When you start living from your future identity and not from the memory of your old self, your actions stop being a sacrifice. They become a consequence. You no longer need to remember to be someone. You just are, because your vibration, your thoughts, your choices are pointing in the same direction. Everything starts to make sense. Everything starts to support each other. This mental model does not start with the question, "What do I need to do?" It starts with the question, "Who am I being now?" Because if the answer is someone who is still defined by the past, any action will be fraught with resistance. But if the answer is someone who is already excited about the future they want, then even the most challenging actions become light, because they begin to serve a coherent purpose. Coherence is silent. It does not impose itself, but it transforms everything. You feel it when you wake up feeling energetic without having slept so much, when you say no peacefully, when you move without needing to convince yourself. It is an internal place where your energy, your intention, and your action walk side by side, without conflict, without wear and tear, without unnecessary effort. Replacing discipline with coherence is not abandoning responsibility. It is abandoning the internal struggle. It is understanding that your body responds better to the frequency of pleasure than to the rigidity of obligation, that the soul moves more strongly when it is not forced, and that everything you need to do is already being done naturally when you are vibrating in the right direction. This is the point where evolution stops being a war and becomes a path, and where you begin to realize that hiding this transformation is also a form of sabotage, because the unconscious only believes in what you live with truth, including what you allow the world to see. And that is what we are going to follow now. The illusion that changing in secret is safer, when, in fact, it is what most delays your expansion. Why trying to evolve in secret is a fatal mistake. There is a silent pact that many people make with themselves at the beginning of a change. I will transform myself, but without anyone noticing. This decision, although it seems prudent, is actually one of the most sophisticated forms of self-sabotage, because every real transformation needs a vibrational field to sustain it. And this field is not formed in isolation. It is strengthened by authentic exposure, by public coherence, by commitment to the visible world. When you try to change in secret, you are telling your unconscious that you are still afraid of being judged, of not being able to cope, of showing yourself. And this fear is the same one that feeds the old self, the same one that prevents manifestation, the same one that keeps you vibrating in protection, not in expansion, because hiding the new is, in a way, protecting the old. The unconscious needs external rituals to validate internal transformations. It needs to see, hear, and touch concrete signs that the change is real. When you share, when you take a stand, when you declare, even in small gestures, even to a few people, you are telling yourself, I believe in this. And it is this visible act of faith that energetically seals the new identity. It is not about exposing yourself out of vanity, but about committing yourself out of coherence. Because the more you try to protect the new in silence, the more fragile it becomes, more vulnerable to the return of old frequencies, more susceptible to the internal voices that say, no one saw it, so no one will notice if you go back. Showing the world who you are becoming is often what keeps you from going back to who you were, because by doing so, you create witnesses. You activate self-observation. You transform change into something that is no longer negotiable. no longer just internal, but whole, real, rooted. And in this new state, something curious happens. The old self tries to disguise itself. It puts on new clothes. It hides behind tasks. It presents itself as productivity, as the pursuit of goals. But deep down, it continues to command. That is why the next step is essential, recognizing that the old pattern can reappear with a new mask, and understanding how it acts when it tries to survive undetected. Escape disguised as productivity. Not all action is true movement. Often, apparent productivity is just a sophisticated camouflage of stagnation. You run, you get busy, you perform tasks, but inside, nothing changes. Because the energy that sustains these actions does not come from the new self. It comes from the old self, desperate to appear useful, necessary, irreplaceable. The old pattern is clever. It knows that if it tries to remain exactly as it was, it will be easily detected. So it disguises itself. It adapts. It begins to act in new ways. And the most common is overdoing, goals, lists, projects, constant effort. You feel like you are moving forward, but you don't realize that you are just spinning your wheels in the same place, because it is not the amount of action that transforms. It is the vibrational quality behind it. True productivity does not wear you down. It nourishes you. It expands you. It is born from a state of coherence, of clarity, of alignment with the greater purpose. When you act from the new self, there is peace, even in the intensity. There is lightness, even in the responsibility. There is joy, even in the simplest tasks. But when the action comes from the old self, it weighs you down. It suffocates you. It exhausts you, because you are not building the new. You are trying to avoid the void. You are using doing as an escape. And that is why you never feel fulfilled, even after a whole day of effort. Because the soul knows. She knows that you are still stuck in a character that only knows how to exist if you are always busy. Recognizing this pattern is liberating, because it allows you to stop without guilt, to breathe without fear, to start acting from a quieter and more authentic space. And often, this requires a confrontation with your history, a profound review of the narrative you created about deservingness, effort, and personal value. And it is precisely at this point that entire lives change, when you understand that you no longer need to suffer to deserve, that you no longer need to prove yourself to exist, that you can thrive from a new center. And that is what we will talk about now. The journey of someone who only knew true abundance when he had the courage to bury the hard-working character. How a businessman only prospered after he killed the hard-working character. For years, he believed that he needed to suffer to be worthy, that success was synonymous with constant struggle, sleepless nights, lack of pleasure. He was admired for his dedication, respected for his productivity, seen as an example of overcoming. But inside, he carried a chronic exhaustion that no achievement could erase. This businessman, like so many others, did not realize that his efforts were not the result of passion, but of trauma. He grew up hearing that he would only be loved if he proved his worth. That love needed to be earned, not lived. And so his life became a long marathon of invisible tests. Each goal achieved was an unconscious attempt to deserve to exist, to be enough, to compensate for a feeling of inadequacy that he could barely name. The money came, the results arrived, but his soul withered. Happiness was fleeting. Pleasure was always postponed. The feeling of being almost there was permanent, until his body gave up. A health crisis forced him to be silent, and in the silence he saw the character, the one he himself created to protect himself from the pain of not being recognized. That was when the turning point began, not when he tried to work less, but when he recognized that he was playing a role, the character of the tireless man, the incorrigible warrior, the leader who never falters. This character needed to die, not the professional, but the vibrational identity that kept him hostage to a frequency of continuous effort. He did not abandon his projects, but he began to execute them with new energy, with pleasure, with pauses, with purpose. He stopped hiding behind productivity. He began to create from presence. And curiously, the lighter he became, the more abundant his life became. Because real prosperity does not respond to effort. It responds to coherence, to vibrational authenticity, to inner freedom. This story is a mirror for many, because the character of the hard worker is celebrated socially, but hides an emotional prison. And only those who have the courage to unmask him can access a new frequency of expansion. A frequency where time is no longer an enemy, where the journey is no longer a sacrifice, where the soul finally breathes. And it is in this breathing that many people are mistaken, because they confuse natural rhythm with slowness. They confuse wisdom with delay, and they end up falling into one of the biggest traps on the path. The idea that evolving slowly is always the most spiritual, when in fact, it can be just another elegant way of postponing the inevitable. That is what we are going to delve into now, the slow process trap. There is a widespread belief in the world of self-knowledge that all transformation needs to be slow, gradual, respectful of internal time. And yes, in many cases, the rhythm of the heart must be honored. But there is a profound difference between respecting the soul's time and using this discourse as an excuse for not acting, as an unconscious way of justifying remaining in patterns that should have already been left behind. Misunderstood spirituality can become an accomplice to emotional procrastination. I'm taking my time becomes the new, I'll look into it later. I'm in process becomes, I don't want to confront myself right now. The problem isn't slowness, it's a lack of honesty. Because if you were really moving, even if slowly, you would be feeling expansion, you would be feeling progress, you would be little by little becoming something else. But when you repeat this speech for months, years, and you're still in the same vibrational place, it's not a process. It's stagnation in disguise. It's the old self dressing up as consciousness. It's pain being postponed, not healed. It's fear being protected with pretty words. Because change hurts. Change requires renunciation. And the speech of slow and steady offers a kind of emotional relief to those who are not yet ready to feel this pain. The natural rhythm of the soul is not always slow. Sometimes it's urgent. It pulses strongly. It demands quick decisions, definitive ruptures, movements that do not fit into the ego's calendar. The butterfly does not transform gradually. The cocoon breaks. The old skin falls off. And this is not violence. It is nature. It is the way life reinvents itself. And it takes sensitivity to discern whether you are truly in process or just stuck, whether you are in motion or just spinning around inside a comfort zone decorated with spiritual words. Because there are times when waiting is wisdom, but there are other times when waiting is self-betrayal. This discernment comes from deep listening, from honest observation, and often from the courage to recognize that your mind may be overprotecting you, that your body is addicted to avoiding confrontation, that your identity still feeds on familiar pain. And at this point, we enter a territory where science and spirituality meet, the neurochemistry of identity, how the brain responds to familiar pain and resists unfamiliar pleasure, the neurochemistry of identity, dopamine, guilt, and self-sabotage. Inside you, there is an invisible laboratory that measures every gesture, every thought, every emotion, a laboratory formed by neurotransmitters that respond to what is familiar and reject what is new. Dopamine, for example, rewards longevity, not novelty. It celebrates routines that the brain already recognizes. It tries to keep you safe, even if the cost is stagnation. On the other hand, unfamiliar pleasure has no place in this system. It does not generate an increase in dopamine. It generates tension, and therefore, the brain resists, even if this tension leads you to greater freedom. Guilt, on the other hand, is a powerful emotional tool. It arises whenever you try to break away, whenever you say, "It's different now," whenever you declare a profound change, and it reminds you of what should have been already, of what isn't fair, of what you wasted up until now. Guilt is part of the old emotional contract that you signed with yourself, even without realizing it. a contract whose objective was to keep you within the known circuit, even if this circuit was painful. And that's where self-sabotage finds fertile ground. It happens when you try to change, but the chemical system that supports your identity fights against you. When you plan an act of self-love, but feel empty, guilty, uncomfortable. When you want to expand, but your brain says it's not safe. And so you back off, without external guilt, but as if you were following the loudest voice, the one that's on autopilot. Understanding this process is a vital step, because now that you know you're not broken, you know you can reconfigure this system. You can create new associations. You can boost dopamine with experiences that feed the new. You can embrace guilt without being held hostage by it. You can, little by little, train your brain to recognize the pleasure of transformation so that the new version sends positive chemicals and not pictures of fear and remorse. And that's how we enter into something even deeper, the invisible loyalty to pain. Sometimes you don't evolve, not for lack of desire, but out of a silent loyalty to the story that built you. And in that place, old stories find refuge, even when you're about to break free. But we'll talk about that in the next chapter. The silent factor that sabotages your frequency, unconscious loyalty to pain. Not all resistance comes from fear. Some is born from misunderstood love, from the invisible loyalty you still hold to people, stories, and versions of yourself that should have been left in the past. Loyalty to the pain that shaped you, to the bonds that hurt you, to the silent pacts you made with guilt, with scarcity, with suffering. You believe you are ready to evolve, but something in you hesitates. A hesitation that cannot be explained by logic, but that you feel in your body. A subtle break that appears whenever life begins to expand. And if you look honestly, you will realize perhaps you are afraid of growing because it would mean moving away from those you love. Perhaps you fear being too happy and no longer knowing how to fit into the family plot. Perhaps, somewhere deep down, you have associated evolution with betrayal. Betrayal of your origins, of your history, of your pain, as if being free meant abandoning. As if thriving meant forgetting, as if healing meant becoming someone unrecognizable to those who loved you in the midst of chaos. And that is where the energy gets stuck, because the unconscious is loyal. Even if it costs you your expansion, it clings to what was sworn, even in silence, and it keeps you vibrating at a frequency that is no longer yours, but that is still someone's. This loyalty needs to be undone with compassion. Not with guilt, not with rejection, but with energetic maturity. You can honor your story without remaining attached to it. You can love deeply without repeating patterns. You can heal and still remain connected to what formed you, not through pain, but through conscious choice. This is a rupture that happens in the vibrational field, a mourning for what is no longer there, a permission to go beyond, even if no one understands. Because your soul knows. It feels that the time has come to let go, not out of selfishness, but out of love, the highest love you can have for yourself, that of no longer sacrificing yourself for bonds that only survive in pain. And when you free yourself from these bonds, something deep begins to burn inside, a process of transformation that is not delicate nor gradual. It is intense. It is visceral. It is like a cocoon on fire. A metamorphosis that requires internal destruction. And it is precisely this powerful image that we follow now, the metaphor of the cocoon on fire. The image of the butterfly is often romanticized, as if transformation were something light, ethereal, natural. But what many forget is that before the flight, there is a collapse, a deep process of internal destruction. The cocoon is not just a shelter, it is a symbolic death camp. Inside, the caterpillar literally dissolves. Its body falls apart, its structures collapse. Everything it was ceases to exist. This image is not poetry. It is a direct reflection of what happens to you when you are truly evolving. Transformation does not come lightly when it is true. It comes with chaos, with confusion, with sleepless nights and days when nothing seems to make sense. You feel like you are losing everything, because you really are. Losing the old self is not just an idea. It is a concrete sensation, a pain that is not localized, but is constant. The phase of the burning cocoon is the one where you have already decided to change. You have already burned bridges. You have already taken steps. But you still do not feel safe. You are in the fire halfway through. And in this fire, everything that is not essential is consumed. Masks, habits, narratives, relationships based on versions of yourself that no longer exist. Everything dissolves. And this, inevitably, scares you because you feel like you are falling apart, but you are not yet sure what will be born in its place. But that is precisely the point. The new is not born from control. It is born from collapse. From the point where you stop trying to save what is dying and start trusting what is forming, even without form, even without a name, even without guarantees. The burning cocoon is a rite of passage. It is where there is no turning back, but you do not yet see the arrival. It is where all that is left is presence. It is where the ego screams, the body trembles, and the soul observes in silence. Because it knows, it recognizes this field. It has been here before, and it knows that after the fire comes flight. And when you understand that this chaos is not punishment, but preparation, everything changes. Because you stop resisting, and you start collaborating. You give what needs to burn, and let it burn. Because you know that the beauty of the butterfly is not born from effort. It is born from surrendering to the right fire. And it is with this awareness that we come closer to a truth that is rarely said. For the new to enter, you do not need to add. You need to subtract. It is not about adding practices, ideas, theories. It is about expelling what has lost its purpose and allowing absence to reveal the essential. That is what we are now following. The hidden error of those who seek expansion without expulsion. Many believe that evolution is a process of accumulating more knowledge, more tools, more spiritual practices, more goals. But the profound truth is that no true expansion begins with adding. It begins with deleting, with emptying, with letting go. Because the new does not flourish in occupied soil. It requires space. It requires the conscious removal of that which has already lost its purpose. You can spend years seeking to improve yourself, reading books, taking courses, developing skills, and still feel like you are stuck. Because despite all the external movement, internally, you are still stuck in excess, in an identity saturated with ideas, commitments, and expectations that no longer say anything about who you are becoming. Expanding in this sense is not growing. It is letting go. It is letting go. It is uninstalling old codes, silencing inherited voices, undoing silent pacts with past versions of yourself. It is having the courage to look inside and ask, what is still taking up space here, but no longer has life? What part of me still resists the absence, for fear of not knowing who I will be without it? This is a difficult question, because it demands detachment without an immediate promise of replacement. You let go before you know what will come. You expel before you fill. And this challenges everything the ego wants. Control, security, predictability. But the path of the soul is different. It says, empty first. Trust the void. Honor the free space. And then something greater can enter. This is the inverted logic of true evolution. You do not transform yourself by adding. You transform yourself by eliminating what blocks your essence. You do not become enlightened by filling yourself with light, but by erasing the shadows you have been nurturing. It is a vibrational cleansing, a deep cleansing that precedes any real rebirth. And when this field is clean, your frequency changes. And with it, everything around you begins to respond differently. But to sustain this new frequency, it is necessary to go beyond intention. It is necessary to ritualize, symbolize, practice. Give your body, mind, and soul a vibrational structure that allows your new self to stabilize. That's what we'll look at now. A 3-step technique to align your frequency with your future identity. 3-step technique to align your frequency with your future identity. The mind can understand the change. The heart can desire it. But if the frequency doesn't keep up, nothing can sustain itself. The energy still vibrates in the past while the desire points to the future. And that's why, more than wanting, it's necessary to anchor, to root in your body, in your routine, in your internal perception, a new vibration that becomes a foundation, a vibration that effortlessly sustains the version of yourself that you're choosing to be. This technique begins with naming your old self. Naming the old pattern is a way of depersonalizing, of interrupting the unconscious fusion between who you were and who you still believe yourself to be. Naming is recognizing. It's looking into someone's eyes. It's saying, "You existed, but you no longer define me." It could be a symbolic name, a nickname, a title. The important thing is that it represents everything that you have already decided not to carry. The second step is to create a symbol of the new self, something that represents, in a sensorial way, the identity that is emerging. It can be an object, an image, a word, a specific outfit, a song, a tangible reminder that says, "This is where I act now." This symbol is not magical, but it anchors. It generates coherence. It guides choices. It reinforces the decision, even on days when the body hesitates. The third step is to practice daily energetic choices based on the future. Before each action, ask yourself, is this choice consistent with who I am becoming? Does this attitude represent the frequency of my new identity? This is not about perfection. It is about presence, about cultivating everyday, small decisions aligned with the version that already exists in potential and that needs to be strengthened until it becomes natural. These 3 steps are not a method. They are a field, a vibrational space where the new can grow, a constant reminder that true change is more about vibration than behavior, that you don't need to control everything. You just need to keep your energy clean, clear and consistent with what you've chosen to live. And when that vibration stabilizes, something curious starts to happen. The mental noise subsides, the search for answers weakens, and suddenly you find power in silence. A silence that is not emptiness, but pure presence. And that's what we're going to delve into now. Why silence can be more powerful than any mantra. We live in a world saturated with sounds, affirmations, stimuli, and voices. We seek answers in ready-made phrases, in mental commands, in mantras repeated with faith. And although words have their place, there is something that almost no one teaches. Silence, when inhabited with awareness, transforms more profoundly than any sound. Silence is not the absence of noise. It is absolute presence. It is a space where the body finally listens, where the soul, previously muffled by repetitions, can whisper, where the frequency aligns effortlessly, just by not doing. Silence is the only state where you do not assert yourself. You become. You do not repeat that you are. You simply are. It is in this vibrational void that the greatest answers arrive, not as thoughts, but as sensations, as knowledge that cannot be explained, but that is felt clearly in the chest. In silence, the mind loses power and energy takes over. Vibration speaks, and it speaks with a language that does not need translation, truth. Silence demands nothing of you, but at the same time, it demands everything. It demands total presence. It demands that you not run away, that you not try to distract yourself, that you not fill in what is trying to reveal itself. That is why so many people fear silence, because it reveals. It shows what has not yet been integrated. It points out what still needs to die, and also what has already been born but has not yet been acknowledged. It is not about being silent to avoid the world, but about being silent to listen to yourself, to listen to the field, to perceive with honesty what frequency you are really on, because energy does not lie. And in silence, there is no more hiding, but there is also nothing left to prove. In this state, you begin to feel that you do not need so much to access everything, that the essential was never in the excess. It was in the subtlety, in breathing with intention, in observing without judging, in existing without justifying yourself. And at this point, a raw truth emerges. The new identity that you have sought so much is only born when you stop negotiating with the past And it is in this sacred field that we come closer to the final truth of this journey, the one that does not promise comfort, but delivers power, the truth that the new self demands pain, decision, and disloyalty to the past. We are almost there. There is only one step left to the end of this journey. Next, we will enter the final chapter before the conclusion. When it is ready, we will continue. The new self demands pain, decision, and disloyalty to the past. There is a fine line between transformation and repetition, and what determines which side you are on is the decision, not the one made with the mind, but the one sealed with the body, with the soul, with frequency, because the new self does not settle in gently. It demands rupture. It demands a break with everything that still ties you to what has already passed. And above all, it demands a courage that is not noisy, but firm, untouchable, unshakable. This decision, when real, is accompanied by pain, not the pain of blind suffering, but the pain of conscious renunciation, the pain of leaving behind stories, faces, habits, and memories that still offer some comfort, but that no longer nourish you. The pain of saying goodbye not only to people, but to inner versions that have accompanied you for years, and that, on some level, you still love, because they were your companions in the darkness. They were your refuge, your shield, but now they are a prison, and you know it. That is why true transformation does not only require strength, it requires disloyalty. Yes, vibrational disloyalty to the past, to what you promised, to what you swore, to what you thought would never change. Because remaining loyal to an old pact is remaining attached to an energy that no longer matches who you are today. It is betraying the future for fear of disappointing the past. And this is a choice that only you can make. You do not need to become cold, but you need to become clear. You need to decide that you will no longer explain yourself through traumas, that you will no longer negotiate with memories, that will no longer carry what no longer pulses. Because the new self is not built only with affirmations. It is built with positions, with cuts, with distances, with deep alignments that sometimes only you will understand. It is this field of vibrational decision that gives rise to true freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom to be who you came to be, without interference from the versions you have already overcome. This freedom has a price, but it also has a flavor. And those who have tasted it know nothing else is enough after this. Now, we are approaching the end of this journey, and at the same time, the beginning of everything. Let's enter the final conclusion, where we will gather the essences of this awakening. If you are ready, I will proceed to the closing. You have come this far not out of curiosity, but by calling, by an inner impulse that does not scream but persists, a calling that says silently, there is no going back. And it really is not, because now you have seen, now you have felt, now you understand that true evolution is not a spiritual decoration. It is a burning, it is a collapse, it is a rebirth that begins with a farewell without applause. Napoleon Hill spoke of the burning desire, but he was not just talking about will. He was talking about an inner fire that burns emotional bridges, that eliminates escape routes, that transforms change into something inevitable, not because it is easy, but because it is vital. This fire cannot be simulated. It needs to be felt. It needs to consume what you still protected. It needs to leave only the essential, the naked truth of who you choose to be now. Neville Goddard taught, you manifest not what you desire, but what you live from. You do not become something by trying. You become something by incarnating, vibrating, breathing as who you already are. And that changes everything, because when you live from the new identity, the universe stops listening to requests and starts responding with presence. This presence is not made of accumulated practices, but of abandoned characters. The way forward is not to add, it is to subtract. The old self does not retire. It needs to be expelled with energetic decision, with embodied truth, with choices that reveal, without words, that the old cycle is over. Only those who accept losing the comfort of the defeated identity are capable of accessing the power of the future version. Only those who accept the pain of the journey experience the glory of vibrational freedom, and only those who allow themselves to die in peace can be born again with power. If this journey resonated in some deep point of your being, write in the comments, "I choose my new identity." This is not just a comment. It is a vibrational pact, an invisible seal with your future. And if this video reminded you of who you are, allow others to be reminded too. Let this frequency find those who need it most. The revolution is not external. It begins in the silent field of your presence. And there, everything changes.